The Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or SNES, commonly shortened to Super Nintendo, is a 16-bit home video game console developed by Nintendo that was released in 1990 in Japan and Korea, 1991 in North America, 1992 in Europe and Oceania, and 1993 in South America. In Japan, it is called the Super Famicom. To compete with the popular family computer in Japan, NEC Home Electronics launched the PC Engine in 1987, and Sega followed suit with the Mega Drive in 1988. The two platforms were later launched in North America in 1989 as TurboGrafx 16 and the Sega Genesis respectively. Both systems were built on 16-bit architectures and offered improved graphics and sound over the 8-bit NES. However, it took several years for Sega system to become successful. Nintendo executives were in no rush to design a new system, but they reconsidered when they began to see their dominance in the market slipping. On September 9, 1987, then Nintendo President Hiroshi Yamauchi revealed that the development of the Super Famicom in the newspaper Kyoto Shimbun. On August 30, 1988, in an interview with Touch magazine, he announced the development of Super Mario Bros. 4, Dragon Quest V, 3 original games, and he projected sales of 3 million units on the upcoming console. Famicom Hisuyuban magazine speculated that Nintendo's early announcement was probably made to forestall Christmas shoppings for the PC Engine and relayed Enix's clarification that it was waiting for sales figures to select either PC Engine or Super Famicom for its next Dragon Quest game. The magazine and Enix both expressed a strong interest in networking as a standard platform feature. The console was demonstrated to Japanese press on November 21, 1988, and again on July 28, 1989. Designed by Masayuki Uemura, the designer of the original Famicom, the Super Famicom was released in Japan on Wednesday, November 21 of 1990, for 25,000 yen, around 27,804 yen in 2019. It was an instant success. Nintendo's initial shipment of 300 units sold out within hours, and the resulting social disturbance led the Japanese government to ask video game manufacturers to schedule future console releases on weekends. This gained the attention of the Yakuza criminal organization, so the devices were shipped at night to avoid robbery. With the Super Famicom quickly outselling its rivals, Nintendo reasserted itself as the leader of the Japanese console market. Nintendo's success was partially due to the retention of most of its third-party developers, including Capcom, Konami, Tecmo, Square, Koei, and Enix. Nintendo released the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, a redesigned version of the Super Famicom, in North America for around $199 US, equivalent to around $400 US in 2021. It began shipping in limited quantities on August 23, 1991, with an official nationwide release date of September 9, 1991. The Super Nintendo was also released in the UK and Ireland in April 1992 for £150, equivalent to £330 in 2021. Most of the PAL region versions of the console used the Japanese Super Famicom design, except for the labeling and the length of the joypad LEDs. The Playtronic Super Nintendo in Brazil, although PAL-M, uses the North America design. Both the NES and Super Nintendo were released in Brazil in 1993 by Playtronic, a joint venture between the toy company Estrela and consumer electronics company Gradiente. The Super Nintendo and Super Famicom launched with few games, but these games were well received. In Japan, only two were initially available: Super Mario World and F-Zero. Bamboozle was released during the launch week. In North America, Super Mario World was launched as a bundle with the console. Other launch games include F-Zero, Pilot Wings, both of which demonstrates the console's Mode 7 pseudo 3D rendering, SimCity, and Gradius 3. In this episode, we are going to check out the best Super Nintendo games growing up in the Philippines. Why top 6? Because top 10s are everywhere and top 5s are not rare. Do you know what sticks? It is my top 6. But first, take a second to hit on the subscribe button so you will never miss another episode of my weekly top 6. Now, let us go through the list and let us see how many of your favorite Super Nintendo games I consider the best. Number 6, Contra 3: The Alien Wars. Contra and its sequel Super C were among the best games released on the NES, so expectations were high for the Super Nintendo follow-up. Thankfully, Konami delivered a game that upped the ante with even more ridiculous set pieces, like riding a motorcycle and a missile. Better graphics than ever, and the series trademarked tough but fair difficulty. There's a reason why the Alien Wars is often called the best game in the long-running series. Number 5, Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong was the original face of Nintendo during the early arcade days, but by the time the Super Nintendo had rolled around, the Big Ape had been overshadowed by a certain Italian plumber. Meanwhile, the Big Ape hadn't starred in a game in years, and Donkey Kong Jr., the original baddie's son, only had a supporting role in Super Mario Kart. Fortunately, Donkey Kong Country used then revolutionary 3D sprites to bring a new life to the character. At the time, no other game had the same level of detail. In fact, there still aren't many games that look like it. Admittedly, the gameplay isn't that quite smooth as many of the other contemporary Nintendo titles. At times, the game can be downright frustrating, but DKC is still worth the occasional playthrough, as are its many sequels. Number 4, Street Fighter Turbo. The 90s were the heydays of fighting games, but with a few exceptions. Most of those titles have been long forgotten. Then there's the classic Street Fighter 2. Capcom stumbled into something big with its sequel combo system, allowing players to strategize like never before and eke out victories when defeat seemed all but certain. Add in a cast of instant iconic characters from around the globe and a pumped-up soundtrack, and you have a recipe for one of the best fighters ever made. There have been a ton of Street Fighter games since this one, including a plenty of updated versions of the second game, but Street Fighter 2 Turbo on the Super Nintendo is the ultimate version of the game. It's also the game that introduced the mighty Akuma to the fighting world, so a big point for that. Number 3, Super Mario World. Back in the 80s and 90s, the debut of each new Mario game was meant to completely change the perception of video games. We had all played the NES Super Mario Bros. Game at this point, and as beloved as they were, nothing could compare us from the world's massive interconnected map and its numerous secrets. While the K power-up wasn't that revolutionary as Mario's raccoon costume, the addition of Yoshi created tons of new strategies for playing a Mario game, and it can be overstated how mind-blowing the graphics and sound were compared to anything on the NES. There's a very good argument to be made that Nintendo still hasn't made a better Mario game since the Super Mario World. Even the better graphics and 4-player co-op of the new Super Mario Bros. Games haven't topped the legendary platformer. Number 2. NBA Jam. There's a time when sports games did not try so hard to simulate the real thing while squeezing every last penny out of players through microtransactions. You used to just pick an NBA star, or maybe a Mortal Kombat character, or a US president, head to the court, and proceed to repeatedly jump 50 feet in the air to dunk on your opponents while setting the ball on fire. It was a very simpler time. NBA Jam is basketball in only the loosest sense of the word. But by throwing out most of the rulebook and focusing on the action and pure fun, it morphed into a classic game that even players who care little for sports can enjoy. Before we proceed, don't forget to like and subscribe to GVE Raven Gaming for more content. If you want, you can also hit on the notification bell icon to be notified for future videos. Number 1. Mega Man X. With a whopping 6 games released on NES, the original Mega Man series was getting a little bit stale by the early 90s. Mega Man X injected new life into the series with a more mature protagonist and faster gameplay that allowed him to dash and climb. Still, the basic combat and ability to choose which Robot Master to face next ensured that Mega Man X did not stray too far from its roots. A ridiculous number of sequels have followed in the X series and multiple other Mega Man sub-series. And while X2 and X3 on the Super Nintendo are also fine games, there's a very good argument to be made that Capcom still hasn't surpassed the original Mega Man X as the best game in the entire franchise. And that's it for my top 6 Super Nintendo games growing up in the Philippines. And a big thanks for watching. Did I miss some of your favorite games? Let me know by commenting below. If you like this video, click below to subscribe, click here for the previous video, and click here to see what YouTube recommends you. Bye!